Mom, when do I get a dad I actually like? The ballroom froze. Crystal glasses hung midair. Victoria Hale, CEO, widow, unshakable in boardrooms, felt the question cut straight through the armor she'd worn for 4 years. Her 10-year-old daughter Lily, gripping the microphone with both hands, didn't flinch under 100 staring eyes. In that moment, careers, reputations, and carefully guarded walls trembled. This wasn't on the program. But the truth never waits for an invitation. Follow my story to the end and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story travels. The charity gala was supposed to be flawless, the kind of event where reputations polished themselves under the glow of chandeliers and six-figure donations. Victoria had rehearsed every beat, the welcoming smile, the speech about new housing initiatives, the measured applause. She hadn't rehearsed for Lily's voice cutting through the air like a bell. Mom, when do I get a dad I actually like? It was the kind of sentence that didn't just land, it lodged. Conversations froze. Waiters stopped mid-pour. Somewhere in the back, a journalist's pen hovered over a notepad. Victoria stood at the podium, silver dress catching the light spine as straight as the skyline outside. Her instinct was to smooth over redirect keep control. But when she crouched to meet her daughter's eyes, she saw something unblinking there. "Sweetheart," she said softly, her voice low enough that only the front rows might hear, "we talk about big things at home." Lily, 10 years old and apparently immune to etiquette, lifted the mic closer. Home doesn't listen like this room does. The crowd inhaled as one. From a table near the stage, a man in a tux leaned toward his date. "This is why you don't bring kids to these things," he muttered, forgetting that cameras love a careless sentence. The event's MC began to flutter toward the podium, but Victoria raised her hand, stopping him. She turned to the guests, her voice steady and clear. "My daughter asked a brave question," she said, "and I'm not going to punish bravery." A ripple of murmurs moved through the donors. Somewhere, a wineglass clinked against marble. Lily tugged on her mother's sleeve. "You said love isn't a business plan, but you also said you hire people who fit our family. I want to help." A small, unpolished laugh escaped Victoria, the kind she hadn't heard from herself in a long time. "I did say that." She stood, taking the microphone again, but her tone stayed warm. "Most of you know I was widowed when Lily was 6. Grief doesn't end. It changes jobs. Tonight my daughter asked if she can help me choose who joins our family someday. To be clear, we're not holding auditions for my heart, but I am listening to her." A few people chuckled. More leaned in. "For the next 4 weeks, we'll arrange a few honest, ordinary moments. No glitter, no pressure. Where we can meet good men in daylight and see how we feel. Lily gets a voice. I keep the decision. That's family voice and responsibility sharing the table." From the front row, a lawyer nodded despite himself. From the back, a reporter underlined the words, "voice and responsibility." And Lily added, leaning into the microphone, "There has to be ice cream, because you can tell everything about a person by how they order ice cream." Laughter broke through the tension. For a heartbeat, the gala felt almost human again. Victoria pressed a kiss to her daughter's temple, the speech she'd prepared now useless. She turned back to the donors. "Let's raise money for homes that don't have to ask these questions in public." The paddle raise soared higher than anyone expected because scandal has a way of making generosity feel like wisdom. Hours later, after the speeches and photographs, Victoria slipped out onto the balcony. Midtown shimmered below like a jewelry case no one could close. Lily joined her, resting her small hands on the railing. "Are you mad at me?" Victoria shook her head. "I'm proud of you. I didn't mean to interrupt. It just felt like if I didn't say it now, I'd never say it." "That's how truth behaves," Victoria said, draping her shawl over Lily's shoulders. "Truth needs a microphone or it loses its nerve." Lily leaned against her. "I miss him less when I think about what could be next." Victoria swallowed. "Me too." Behind them, the balcony door opened. The MC's voice was careful. "Press is gathering downstairs. We can decline, but they'll write their own story either way." Victoria looked at Lily. "One rule, no one learns anything about you that you don't want them to know. This is our story, not theirs." Lily straightened. "Got it." They went inside together, stepping into a hallway that smelled faintly of champagne and flashbulbs. Outside the ballroom, the hum of questions was waiting sharp as teeth, and somewhere Victoria knew the real story had only just begun. Victoria didn't remember the exact moment she decided not to avoid the press. It might have been the way Lily's hand stayed tucked in hers as they stepped back into the ballroom. It might have been the way the hush shifted into a hum the second they reappeared, the way phones rose like periscopes above the crowd. Or maybe it was the simple truth: if you let someone else write your story, they'll turn it into something you don't recognize. The MC tried to clear a path, murmuring about an off-the-record statement, but Victoria shook her head. Lily's grip tightened just enough for her to notice. They stopped in the glare of cameras. A voice from the back called out, "Ms. Hello. Are you launching a reality show?" Another sharper followed. "Is it healthy for a child to choose your partner?" Then came the one she knew someone would throw. "Are you saying money can buy a family?" Victoria's smile held, but it was the kind of smile that didn't ask for approval. "I'm saying children deserve a say in the shape of their lives. I'm saying grief is real and love is careful. And I'm saying the only format I care about is decency." There was a brief, awkward pause, the kind that reporters live for and CEOs dread. Then a woman in the second row raised her voice. "Criteria, Ms. Hale." If men are listening tonight, what should they know? Victoria took her time answering. Kindness is non-negotiable. Integrity under stress. Humor that isn't a weapon. And a willingness to eat ice cream in winter. She glanced down at Lily, who grinned. "We'll meet people the way normal people do: coffee shops, museums, parks. No cameras, no influencers, no scorecards." "What about money?" someone shouted from the back. Her smile cooled. "What I won't date is arrogance." She took Lily's hand again. "Good night." They made it to the car without further questions, the city's cold air sweeping away the ballroom heat. Inside, Lily kicked her shoes off, curling into her seat. "You didn't look scared," she said. "I was terrified," Victoria admitted. "I just didn't let my face vote." Lily's laugh was a small, bright thing in the dark. "Can one of the places be the Science Museum? If a man can't wonder at a dinosaur, he can't wonder at me." Victoria considered this like it was a serious boardroom proposal. Add it to the list. When they reached the penthouse, the lemon and paper scent of home greeted them. 2 calendars sat on the kitchen island, one for quarterly closings, the other for Lily's recitals and orthodontist appointments. Victoria poured herself tea. She wouldn't finish, opened her laptop, and typed a note to herself: 4-week plan. Low-key meetings. Daytime public spaces. No press. Background checks. Lily's input recorded privately. Ordinary moments over staged ones. Lily padded in wearing pajamas with watercolor moons. "Can I sleep in your room?" "You can start there," Victoria said, "but I'll carry you back because you're a human anvil." "I'm not heavy," Lily argued, climbing onto the bed with the shamelessness of children. She stared at the city lights beyond the glass. "Will people be mean online?" "Some will," Victoria said. "But they're typing at a screen, not standing in our kitchen. Kitchen rules matter more." "What are kitchen rules?" "We use names, not labels. We talk to faces, not profiles. And we eat ice cream in winter." "You heard that?" "I heard everything," Victoria said, tucking the blanket to her daughter's chin. "Tomorrow, we'll make the list. Not just names, the qualities that matter. What if the best person doesn't look like the best person?" "Then we learn to look better," she answered. Lily's eyes drifted shut, but a question slipped through. "If I ask something in a room again, and your ribs make that face, will you still let me ask it?" "That's what our house is for," Victoria said softly. "Questions that make ribs make faces." Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, her COO a string of question marks, and one. "Are you sure?" she typed back. "I'm sure of the why. We'll make the how responsible." In the morning, the headlines had cooled from scandal to speculation. At Hale Development's glass-walled conference room, speculation had a seat at the table. Nora Patel, her COO, slid a folder across the polished oak. 5 prospects. All vetted. No liabilities, no tabloid landmines, and every one of them intersects with our pipeline in a legitimate way. "Vetted for the business," Victoria said, "not for my kitchen table." "That's why we stacked the deck with daylight," Nora replied. "Coffee shops, museums. 0 champagne. 2 therapists on speed dial. Legal gave me language for informed consent if anyone so much as breathes near a camera. Dr. Klein, their family therapist, was on speakerphone. Remember the ground rules, Victoria. You set boundaries. Lily gives feelings and nobody performs. Wonder is allowed. Pressure is not. Lily, swinging her small sneakers above the floor, piped up. Can we see dinosaurs before we see men? We can see both, Victoria said, but no letting either bite. Nora tapped the list. First, Elliot Vance, attorney witty, allergic to shortcuts. Second, Dr. Marcus Bell, pediatric cardiologist, empathy for a living. Third, Grant Whitlow, financier, the numbers whisperer. Fourth, Luis Calderon, architect, who designs buildings to be kind to people. Fifth, Raphael Stone, hotelier, runs properties like orchestras. Victoria exhaled. All decent men. All safe choices. But she felt the weight of the unspoken truth. None of them had pulled her daughter out of a stalled elevator with a voice steady enough to calm panic. She closed the folder. Daylight it is. No headlines. No auditions. We meet people like people. And ice cream is non-negotiable, Lily added, raising her hand like she was in class. The first ordinary moment on the calendar was a sight walk at a development lot, brick walls and frost hard hats lined up like punctuation marks. Luis handed Lily a helmet stenciled with Hale's logo. No bad questions here, he told her. Why are pigeons always invited to construction, she asked. Luis didn't miss a beat. Because they never sign NDAs. Her laughter rang clear in the cold morning. They walked the perimeter, Luis explaining load paths the way you'd tell a secret to a friend. Lily pressed her palm to a steel column. So this is bone. It is, Luis said. The skin comes later. As they neared the freight elevator, a superintendent frowned at a beeping panel. She's been testy all morning. Maintenance check in 20, Luis asked. We can take the stairs. Top deck's the better view, the superintendent said, prying the door open. They stepped inside. 10 seconds later, the elevator sighed to a stop between floors. Lights flickered. Lily's fingers closed around her mother's coat. Victoria crouched, keeping her voice even. Look at me. Count my freckles. The air feels sticky, Lily whispered. A knuckle rapped the outer door. Hey there, a man's voice called. Name's Jack Brooks. You're safe. Can you help me breathe like we're blowing out birthday candles? So the moment his voice slipped into that tight space, the panic shifted. Lily's grip loosened. Victoria didn't know why it worked, only that it did. And she had no idea yet that this voice, calm, grounded, unshaken, would soon shift more than just the air in an elevator. The metal gate shuddered, a crowbar bit into the seam, and then daylight split the darkness in a clean, bright line. A face appeared in the opening late-30s hair, damp with effort, eyes steady in a way that made you feel you were already halfway to safe. He didn't reach in right away. I'm going to get you out, the man said, his voice low, unhurried. We take it slow because slow is smart. Victoria felt her knees go weak, not from the claustrophobia, but from the relief threading through his tone. She lifted Lily toward him. He didn't grab, didn't rush, just anchored her weight until she stepped onto the solid hallway floor. Luis followed, and then Victoria climbed out, last palms burning where she'd gripped the frame. You used a nice voice, Lily told him, with the solemnity of a verdict. I saved the mean one for broken vacuum cleaners, he said. It's less effective on people. Victoria met his eyes. Thank you, she said, and it came out heavier than etiquette. He shrugged slightly. I got stuck in one of these when I was 8. My mom talked me out. I just borrowed her voice. Lily studied him, then offered her hand. I'm Lily. 7's my lucky number for the record. Jack, he said, shaking with equal gravity, and I'm fine with borrowing luck. The superintendent came bustling over, radio crackling. She's offline until we swap the relay. Sorry for the trouble. Luis waved it away. Victoria didn't. She wanted to say something about leadership, about how it was exactly what Jack had done in that cramped space gather panic. Give it a job, turn it into breath. But she kept it simple. Were you on your way to us, or did you just happen to appear? On my way to the roof, he said, half smiling. The heater likes dramatic gestures in February. Lily glanced at his tool belt. Do you fix everything? I try not to break it worse, he said. That's half the job. Victoria held his gaze a moment longer than strangers usually do. There was nothing grand about him, except the exact kind of steadiness she'd promised herself she would notice if it ever showed up. As they walked back toward the stairs, Lily leaned close to her mother. Is he on the list? She whispered. The list is for meetings, Victoria whispered back. Sometimes real life is the meeting, Lily said. That night, Victoria found herself adding a line to the private calendar no one else saw. Ordinary moments note who gets smaller so a child can breathe. Monday morning, she walked into the lobby with the intent to keep her eyes forward and her schedule tight. But there he was again, kneeling beside a tool cart under the Bronze Hail Development logo, tightening a baseboard panel. The same quiet focus he'd had in the elevator clung to him now like background music no one else could hear. Lily spotted him first. It's the 7 guy she whispered, tugging on Victoria's sleeve. Jack looked up, recognition flickering across his face. "Morning," he said simply, wiping his hands on a rag. "Thank you again for the other day," Victoria told him. "That's what I'm here for," he said. "Making stuck things move again." "We're going to my mom's office," Lily announced. "Want to come?" Jack gave a short laugh. "I don't think they let janitors crash CEO meetings. Maybe they should." Lily answered without missing a beat. Victoria caught the small smirk he tried to hide. It said a child had just spoken the most accurate truth in the room. Later that morning, in her corner office, she sat through a meeting about Riverton, the flagship housing project teetering on collapse because of an engineering bottleneck. The structural engineer on the call said the fix would require a redesign from scratch, 3 months minimum, 6 figures in costs. A knock interrupted. Jack stepped in holding an envelope. "Mailroom sent this up," he said. He set it down, but his eyes drifted to the blueprints. "Is that Riverton?" "It is," Victoria replied cautiously. "Why?" "He studied the cross-section. You've got a load transfer bottleneck here. If you stagger the micropiles and step the footing, you can carry the same load without touching the utilities. Cuts install time by 2/3. Her project manager blinked. "That's not bad." Jack straightened. "Did something similar in Boston before I was wearing this shirt." "What shirt was that, project manager?" "Civil engineering," he said evenly. "Before a bad lawsuit and a worse friend taught me humility. Now I mop floors and fix elevators, but the math still works." Silence lingered on the call until the engineer finally said, "That could actually solve it." Jack offered to run the calculations that night. No charge. Professional itch, he called it. By 9:17 p.m., Victoria's inbox pinged with a PDF clean diagrams, precise formulas, annotated sketches. Beneath it, a note. "No guarantees, but this is the path I'd bet my own roof on." 2 days later, the City Review Board approved the plan without hesitation. Riverton was back on track. Victoria didn't summon Jack to her office. She went looking for him. She found him in the sub-basement, coaxing a stubborn water line into cooperation. "Riverton's approved," she said. He glanced up. "Good. That's one less building holding its breath." "You just saved us millions," she told him. "I just hated seeing a good project die of paperwork." "Why didn't you go back to engineering?" "Life's not always linear," he said. "I had a son to raise a legal mess to climb out of and no patience for partners who cut corners. Janitorial work's honest. No one lies to you about where the dirt is." The hum of the building filled the pause that followed. "You're wasted down here," she said. "I'm just not where most people expect to find me." Before she could reply, Lily's voice echoed from the stairwell. "Mom, Mr. Jack." She appeared holding a sketch pad. "I drew the elevator we got stuck in, and a better one. Want to see Jack crouch to look?" "Nice. You gave it windows." "Everything feels safer with a view," Lily said matter-of-factly. Victoria saw the way he listened, not indulgent, not dismissive, but as if her opinion had weight. Something in her chest shifted. That night she sat at the kitchen counter, tea cooling beside her laptop, reading his note again. "The path I'd bet my own roof on." She thought of Lily's sketch. She thought of the tenants who would have homes because a man in coveralls still remembered how to read blueprints. And she thought not for the first time that some people were exactly where they needed to be until the right moment asked them to step into someplace bigger. Somewhere across the city, she imagined him tucking his son into bed, unaware that forces around them were beginning to move, and not all of them had good intentions. The following Friday evening, Victoria stood at the edge of the rooftop terrace, the city spread below in glittering layers. She'd arrived late on purpose. The 5 vetted candidates Nora had selected were here already gathered in a loose arc near the glass railing, drinks in hand. Lily was at a corner table sketching the skyline, Ethan beside her, their heads bent close in shared concentration. Jack, of course, was nowhere in sight. This wasn't his world, and she hadn't invited him. She sipped her club soda and listened without being seen. The financier Grant Whitlow was the first to break the polished hum. "You can't tell me she's serious about letting the kid have that much say. It's optics." Raphael Stone, the hotelier, chuckled. "Press loves a modern fairy tale. But a janitor, that's a headline you can't scrub." Luis the architect laughed under his breath. "I heard he saved Riverton. Probably thinks that buys him a seat at the table." Elliot Vance adjusted his cufflinks. "Saving a project doesn't mean you belong in the boardroom. Or the family. Different leagues entirely." Their laughter was subtle but sharp enough to draw blood if you cared to feel it. What they didn't know was that Lily had stopped sketching. She looked up from the paper, her small voice cutting across the space without strain. "Mr. Jack fixes things you don't even see are broken." The terrace went silent. You could hear the clink of ice in glasses from a table across the deck. Victoria stepped forward before anyone could recover. "Lily," she said gently, "why don't you grab a soda from the bar?" When her daughter was out of range, she turned to the group, her voice even but colder than the night air. "You're here because I believed each of you understood this wasn't just about me. If you can't respect the people my daughter respects, you've already lost." Elliot's jaw tightened. I know exactly what you were just," she cut in. "And for the record, Riverton's tenants will never care about your leagues. They'll care that they have walls that stand." She didn't wait for apologies. The night air felt heavier than when she'd arrived. Downstairs in the lobby, she found Lily sitting by the fountain, stirring ice in her soda. "They don't like him," Lily said quietly. "They don't know him," Victoria replied. "They don't want to," Lily countered, and that was the line that stuck with her all the way home. The next week, she spotted Jack on the mezzanine, changing out a flickering light. "Do you have a minute?" she asked. "Sure," he said, glancing down from the ladder. "Want me to grab a coffee or a wrench?" "Neither. Just your time." They sat in the small staff lounge, the hum of vending machines filling the pauses. She told him about the rooftop, about what the men had said about Lily's defense. Jack leaned forward, forearms on his knees. "Sounds like they're protecting their turf." "It's more than that," she said. "Some of them have deals pending with my company. If they think you're in the picture, they might see me differently." He gave a faint smile. "Then I'd better stay out of the picture." Her stomach tightened. "You think the answer to prejudice is disappearing?" "No. I think the answer is choosing your battles. You can't win every room at once, and some rooms aren't worth the rent." "You make it sound simple." "It's not," he admitted. "But I've been on job sites where the loudest guy was the most useless. I learned to measure people by who's still holding the beam when everyone else steps back." That Friday, she took Lily to the Riverwalk Fair. It was supposed to be just mother and daughter, but halfway through they spotted Ethan in line for the carousel. Jack stood beside him holding 2 corn dogs and looking faintly amused by the coincidence. "Small city," Victoria said when their eyes met. "Smaller fair," he replied. The kids were off in seconds negotiating over who would get the purple horse. Victoria and Jack stood by the railing watching. "You know," she began, "Lily's right. You do fix things people don't even see are broken." "I don't do it for credit," he said. "I know. That's what makes it dangerous for men like you. People think you don't mind being overlooked." He turned to face her fully. "And what do you think I think some people are exactly where they need to be until they're needed somewhere else?" The carousel slowed. Lily waved, Ethan grinning beside her. For a moment, the symmetry of it all unsettled her in the best possible way. But the undercurrent from the rooftop lingered. She knew the men from that night weren't going to vanish. Their investments, their influence, their opinions, all of it was entangled with her professional world. And now one of them, she was certain, would see Jack not as a harmless bystander, but as a competitor. As they walked away from the carousel lights, she kept her voice low. "If someone tried to make your life harder here, would you tell me?" He smirked faintly. "Depends. Are you asking as the CEO or as Lily's mom?" "Both." "Then yes," he said. "But only if I couldn't fix it myself first." Something about that answer, its quiet certainty, lodged deep in her chest. Back at the penthouse that night, Lily was sprawled on the living room rug sketching again. I like Ethan, she said without looking up. I like him too, Victoria said. And I like his dad. Victoria paused. So do I. She didn't say what she was thinking, that liking someone and being ready to fight for them were different things. But in her world, fights had a way of finding you before you decided if you wanted them. And the first signs of that storm, she knew, were already forming. The first sign didn't come from Jack. It came from Nora striding into Victoria's office late Monday morning, her voice pitched low but edged. Richard Evans was in HR today, suggested a strategic reassignment for Jack Brooks. Victoria set down her pen slowly. On what grounds, none stated, just that it would be beneficial to operations if he transferred to our West Side property. Nora's mouth tightened. His exact words, Jack's too visible here. West Side was an hour's commute each way. It would pull him out of Midtown entirely and out of Lily's orbit. Victoria's jaw tightened. An HR in neutral facilitator mode, Nora said, which is code for Richard's got more leverage than they want to challenge. Victoria leaned back, eyes narrowing. So this is how he plays it. That evening, she found Jack in the parking garage closing the tailgate of his old pickup, a coil of hose slung over one shoulder. You're not leaving, are you? Not tonight, he said, giving her a half smile. But they told me I'm getting reassigned to West Side next week. They told you why. Just that I'm needed there more. I've heard that line before. It usually means someone's uncomfortable with you being in the room. This isn't a coincidence, she said. I know. But I'm not going to make your life harder by turning it into a fight. You're underestimating me if you think I'll watch them push you out, she said, stepping closer. He looked at her for a beat, then shook his head with a wry grin. You've got bigger fish to fry, Hale. Let me handle the mop water. You're not mop water, she shot back, sharper than she intended. Something flickered in his face, surprise maybe before he nodded once, and slid the box of supplies into the truck bed. Thanks, but I'll be fine. The next day, she found Lily hunched over the kitchen island with a blank calendar. What's this? It's when I get to see Mr. Jack, Lily said matter-of-factly. It's blank after next week. He said he's moving to another building. It's complicated, Victoria said carefully. It's wrong, Lily replied. If someone's good at their job and nice to people, you don't send them away. That's like firing the sun because you're mad about the heat. Victoria crouched so they were eye level. Sometimes people make changes because they think it's safer for them. Safer isn't always better, Lily said without hesitation. Better is when people like being where they are. By Friday, Victoria had decided to see West Side for herself. Officially, it was to review a delayed renovation. Unofficially, she wanted to know exactly what Jack was being sent to. She found him in a dim boiler room, sleeves rolled, coaxing a stubborn valve. Didn't expect to see you here, he said, straightening. Consider this a wellness visit, she replied. The building's fine, he said. Just needs a little patience. They ended up in the cafeteria, a long, echoing space that smelled faintly of burnt coffee. She unwrapped a sandwich more for something to do than to eat. You know, she said, I've worked with a lot of people who think they're irreplaceable. They almost always are. And the ones who are? He asked. They don't think about it, she said. His smile softened. It's not that I don't want to be here. I just don't want to be the reason you have to fight another battle. You're not the reason, she said. They are. You're just the excuse. That's a nice line. It's not a line. It's the truth. Their conversation was cut short when Lily and Ethan appeared in the doorway, each carrying a paper bag. Surprise lunch delivery, Lily announced. Jack blinked. How did you... Ethan told me where the building was, she said simply. We took the subway. Don't worry, Mrs. Hale, we stayed together the whole time. Jack sighed, half amused, half exasperated. You two are trouble. Good trouble, Lily corrected. They sat together at one of the long tables. The kids traded snacks. Victoria and Jack talked in low voices, the kind that don't carry far but say more than the words themselves. When they left, Victoria caught his arm. I'm not done with this, she said. I figured, he said. But walking out with Lily, she realized it wasn't just about keeping him nearby for her daughter. It was about refusing to let the wrong people decide who belonged in her life. The war Richard thought he was winning had just been declared. And Victoria Hale had no intention of losing. Rain slicked the sidewalks outside Hale Development, the kind of steady drizzle that blurred edges and made the city hum lower. From her office window, Victoria watched umbrellas bob along the avenue, their colors dim under the gray. She'd been in enough boardroom fights to know this was no longer about a single reassignment. It was about influence, who had it, who thought they owned it, and who they expected to bow to it. Nora stepped inside without knocking. "It's official," she said, dropping a printed memo on Victoria's desk. "Jack's transfer order was processed this morning, effective Monday." Victoria read the form. The words were clinical, all resource allocation and operational needs, but she could hear Richard Evans behind every syllable. "Have you spoken to HR?" "They're in neutral facilitator mode." Translation: "Richard's got more leverage in this building than they want to test." Victoria pushed the paper aside. "Then we find another way." Nora hesitated. "Be careful. They're already watching you for overreach. You can't make it look personal." "It is personal," Victoria said quietly. "They made it that way." That night she drove to West Side under the pretense of checking the renovation schedule. The lobby smelled faintly of fresh paint and old carpet. Jack was there on a drop cloth replacing baseboard trim. "Didn't expect a CEO visit at 8 o'clock on a Friday," he said without looking up. "Consider it an inspection." "Of the building or the staff?" he asked, half smiling. "Both." He stood dusting his hands. "Place needs work, but it's solid. Kind of like me, I guess." "You're taking this too calmly," she said. "I've been moved before. When you work with a mop in one hand and a wrench in the other, you learn not to get too attached to a zip code. That's not the point. You were moved because you're good at what you do and because Lily likes you. That combination scares some people." His gaze softened. "And you want to fight that battle?" "I don't want to," she admitted. "But I will." The next morning, Lily sat at the kitchen island, a marker in hand and a sheet of paper spread in front of her. "What are you drawing?" Victoria asked, pouring coffee. "A schedule for seeing Mr. Jack," Lily said, without looking up. "He says he's moving buildings, but that doesn't mean we can't meet up." "It might be harder," Victoria said gently. Lily's jaw set in a way that reminded her uncomfortably of herself. "Then we just try harder. You told me good people don't disappear just because it's inconvenient." "I did say that." By noon, Lily had mapped a subway route, a list of weekend activities Jack and Ethan might like, and a column labeled ice cream opportunities. Victoria couldn't help but smile at the precision. That afternoon, her phone buzzed with a message from Nora. Richard had been overheard telling a contact he had handled the janitor problem. The words landed like a stone in her chest. Sunday afternoon, Victoria told Lily they were going to a cafe for a mother-daughter outing. She didn't mention that she'd already spotted Ethan through the window when she parked. Inside, Jack was at the counter, 2 hot chocolates in hand. His surprise at seeing them was obvious, but not unwelcome. "This is turning into a pattern," he said. "Good patterns are worth keeping," Lily replied before Victoria could answer. They found a corner table. The kids compared school projects while Victoria leaned in toward Jack. "You know what Richard's been saying?" she asked quietly. "I can guess. Something about how moving me was an operational decision. His exact words were that he handled the janitor problem." Jack took a slow sip as if buying himself time. "Sounds like he's more afraid of a mop than he should be." "This isn't just about you," she said. "It's about who gets to decide who belongs in my world." He met her eyes. "And what if belonging comes with a cost you don't want to pay?" "Then I decide if it's worth it." He glanced toward the kids. "They've already decided." When they left, the 4 of them stepped out into the cool air together. The city felt smaller, as if it could fit inside the warmth of that table. Back in the car, Lily leaned her head against the window. "You're not going to let them send him away, are you?" "Not without a fight," Victoria said. That night she sat alone in her apartment, the lights of the city reflecting off the glass. She opened her laptop and began typing a memo, not to HR, not to the board, but to herself. "This isn't about a transfer. It's about influence that assumes I will choose comfort over conviction." They're wrong. She read it twice before closing the file. Outside, the rain had stopped and the wet streets below shimmered like promises she intended to keep. Monday morning began with the kind of urgency that didn't belong to construction schedules or quarterly reports. Nora appeared in Victoria's doorway, face composed but voice carrying a note that made the air feel heavier. "We've got a problem," she said. Victoria didn't look up from the email she was skimming. "Define problem." Midtown Tower atrium drawings are missing. Final revision set. Richard flagged it at 7:10 this morning. Says we've got a breach. Victoria's pen stilled. From where Project Share Drive. Logs show someone accessed it Friday evening. Guess whose credential popped up? She knew before Nora said it. Jack. Nora nodded grimly. It says his login hit the directory at 6:48 p.m. Richard claims it's suspicious. Victoria pushed back from her desk. Have they looked at the full revision history? They will. But Richard's already in the executive conference room pushing for suspension. By the time Victoria arrived, the room was a tableau of polished surfaces and pointed looks. HR sat with a legal pad. The IT director's laptop glowed blue. Richard stood near the head of the table, hands open in mock reason. Unfortunate, he said as if this were weather. But we need swift action. Proprietary drawings don't just walk out. The IT director clicked through logs. Friday, 6:41 p.m. File moved to a local folder on a removable drive. User credential R. Evans. At 6:43, same credential moved it back. At 6:48, credential J. Brooks accessed the shared directory. Richard smiled without smiling. There you have it. The janitor browsed a folder he had no business in. Victoria kept her voice even. We don't punish access. We punish intent. He was seen near the server closet, Richard countered. Because he cleans that floor, she said. Richard's tone turned soft, almost pitying. Victoria. I respect your personal considerations, but this is about safeguarding assets. I don't mix personal with assets, she replied. My consideration is the company's integrity. HR cleared her throat. We recommend placing Mr. Brooks on paid leave for 72 hours pending investigation. Standard protocol. It was standard, but the taste it left was anything but. Fine, Victoria said, then added, pull full revision history, every touch, every timestamp, and preserve security footage for Friday between 6 and 7 p.m. Richard nodded, feigning agreement. Jack didn't argue when she found him in the facilities office folding the notice in half, then again until the paper felt sturdy in his palm. I didn't take anything, he said quietly. I know, she said. I check deliveries sometimes, make sure the night crew doesn't misplace boxes. That's the only reason I even saw project names on that screen. You don't owe me a defense, she told him. He gave her a look with a wry corner in it. Feels like I do. Then let me do my job, she said, and yours right now is waiting. He tucked the folded paper into his back pocket. Waiting's still a verb. That afternoon, Lily sat cross-legged in her mother's office, Ethan beside her, both bent over a sketch pad. It wasn't the ideal day to have them there, but their presence steadied something in her. Is Mr. Jack in trouble? Lily asked. For now, he's resting, Victoria said carefully. Ethan didn't look up from the doodle of a toolbox he was working on. Adults always give naps to the truth. Victoria blinked. What did you say? On Friday, my dad was showing me his tablet while we waited for the subway, he said. His sync app popped up a banner. Said Atrium Rev C final updated by R. Evans, 6:42 p.m. I remember because I asked what an atrium was, and he said, a fancy word for tall air. She crouched in front of him. Are you sure about the time? He nodded a little hurt. I'm not a liar. I didn't say you were. I just needed to know. Sometimes 1 minute is the difference between a mistake and a plan. She turned to Nora, who'd been leaning against the doorframe. Get it to pull external sync notifications. If a personal device was subscribed to the public read-only project feed, it would have seen the update ping. By evening, the IT director was back with a thumb drive. Found mirrored events. Friday, 6:41 to 6:43 p.m. File moved off and back on by R. Evans. Read-only watcher unknown device received update ping. Also, camera footage shows Evans entering the server room at 6:39 with his assistant. Nora let out a breath. So he moved it back, and cried, Wolf! Victoria didn't smile. You don't say that outside this room. Not yet. HR, pause the suspension. Effective immediately. On what basis, HR asked. On the basis that I said so, she replied, and then softening just enough, and on the basis of new information. Legal has it. She stood at her office window after they left the rain-streaked skyline, sharp against the glass. In her gut, she knew Richard wouldn't take the exposure lightly. Men like him never did. But for the moment, Jack was clear, and she intended to keep him that way. By Tuesday morning, the air inside Hale Development felt sharper, like a room where someone had just slammed a door. Word of Jack's reinstatement had already traveled faster than the official memo, and Richard's smile in the hallway carried the brittle edge of a man plotting his next move. Victoria didn't slow when she passed him, but she caught the faintest murmur low enough to pretend it wasn't meant for her. Temporary wins feel permanent until they don't. She kept walking. She'd learned early that responding in the moment sometimes gave your opponent the satisfaction of knowing they'd landed a punch. But by the time she reached her office, she'd already decided the next round would be on her terms. Jack came by just after noon, still in his work shirt sleeves, rolled the faint scent of fresh paint clinging to him. "Thanks for pulling me out of that hole," he said, leaning against the door frame. "I didn't pull you out," she replied. "I just kept them from shoving you deeper." He tilted his head, studying her. "You look like you're thinking 3 moves ahead." "That's because I am." She gestured for him to sit. "You're clean, but Richard won't stop. And I need to know if he pushes again. Are you willing to push back?" Jack gave a small shrug. "I'm not afraid of him. I just don't want to make life harder for Ethan. I've had enough nights of explaining why grown-ups act like playground bullies." "You wouldn't be alone this time," she said. He gave her a slow nod. "Then, yeah, I'll push back." That evening, she picked up Lily from her after-school art program, the child bubbling with stories about clay sculptures and paint-smeared aprons. As they walked to the car, Lily stopped short, spotting Ethan and Jack across the street. They were on their way out of a small hardware store, Jack balancing a paper bag under one arm. "Mr. Jack," Lily called, waving. They crossed to meet them, and for a moment the 4 of them stood in the fading gold of the day, the city noise folding in around them like background music. "Buying supplies for another project?" Victoria asked. "Ethan's school science fair," Jack said. "We're building a wind turbine out of scrap metal and bike parts. If it works, we'll probably have the noisiest project there." Ethan grinned. "Noise means power." Sometimes, Jack said, glancing at Victoria, it means attention. They ended up at a corner diner, kids sliding into one side of the booth while she and Jack took the other. The food came fast, burgers, fries, milkshakes, and the conversation drifted between school stories and half-formed plans for the weekend. When the plates were cleared, Lily leaned forward, chin propped in her hands. "Why don't you just work here again, Mr. Jack? Then you wouldn't have to take the train so much." "It's not that simple," Jack said gently. "Some people don't like having me around." Why she pressed? He glanced at Victoria before answering. "Sometimes people think they know what kind of person belongs in a place. And if you don't match that picture in their head, they try to move you out of it." Lily frowned. "That's dumb." Jack smiled faintly. "It is. But it happens." Victoria caught the way his tone softened at the end, as if he didn't want to burden her daughter with the weight of adult prejudice. It was the same instinct she'd had for years, shielding Lily from the worst parts of the world, only now she wasn't sure shielding was the answer. The next morning, Nora appeared in her office holding a slim folder. "I did some digging. Richard's been funneling small renovation contracts to a shell company. No bids, just direct awards. Guess who owns it?" Victoria opened the folder, scanning the documents. His brother-in-law. "Exactly. All under the threshold for mandatory board review." "This is enough to force an ethics hearing," Victoria said. "Enough to make him sweat," Nora corrected. "But you need to be ready, he'll come swinging." By Thursday, she'd set the wheels in motion. Legal had the contracts. Compliance had the paper trail. All that remained was timing, and she chose the board's quarterly review, an open meeting Richard couldn't avoid. Jack heard about it that evening, not from her, but from one of the night crew who'd seen the notice on the internal calendar. He showed up outside her building just as she was leaving, leaning against the low stone wall. "You're going after him," he said. "I'm going after the truth," she replied. He gave a short laugh. "Truth's got sharp teeth. Make sure you're not the one bleeding." "I've bled before," she said. "And I'm still here." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The traffic light at the corner cycled from green to yellow to red, the city moving on oblivious to the small war being fought in its shadows. Finally, Jack straightened. "If you need someone in your corner, I'm there. Just don't let them use me to get to you." "They already tried," she said. "It didn't work." The look he gave her, then equal parts respect and worry, stayed with her all the way home. She knew the coming week would be decisive. Richard would either be cornered or more dangerous than ever. And in either case, she couldn't afford to misstep. The boardroom smelled faintly of polished oak and fresh coffee, but there was an undertone of something sharper anticipation, maybe even blood. The quarterly review had drawn a full attendance. Every seat around the long table filled, every pen poised. Richard sat 2 chairs down from the head, his tailored suit immaculate, his smile thin and self-assured. Victoria entered without hurry, her notes in a leather folio, Nora trailing behind with a laptop. She took her place at the far end, eyes sweeping the table, pausing on each face just long enough to register who was restless, who was calm, and who was watching for the first misstep. "Let's begin," the chairman said, voice neutral. Reports passed without friction until Nora's slide appeared on the central screen. It was a standard review of ongoing property renovations until the numbers shifted. The breakdown of vendor contracts flashed in sharp, color-coded clarity. Victoria spoke evenly, but her voice carried. "You'll notice a pattern in the Midtown West Side and Parkview projects. A significant number of contracts were awarded without competitive bidding." The room stilled. These awards, she continued, were made to a company registered under a separate name, but linked through state filings to a family member of one of our senior executives. Richard leaned back, smiling like a man humoring a child. "I assume you've verified this with legal." "Fully," she said. "The contracts fall below the threshold requiring board approval, which may explain why the pattern went unnoticed. However, aggregated over the last fiscal year, they represent nearly $400,000 in expenditures." A murmur moved through the room. Richard kept his tone smooth. "If there's an administrative oversight, I'm sure it can be corrected without public spectacle." Victoria let the pause stretch. "Oversight implies accident. This is not accidental." The chairman cleared his throat. "We'll need to investigate." "Agreed," Victoria said. "And in the meantime, I recommend placing all contracts involving the vendor in question on hold pending review." Richard's jaw tightened, but he didn't protest. "Not here, not with the board watching." After the meeting, he caught her in the hallway, the polite mask gone. "You've made a mistake," he said quietly. The mistake, she replied, was thinking no one would notice. His eyes narrowed. "You think you've won something today." "You haven't." She stepped closer, close enough that only he could hear. "Maybe not, but I've taken something from you, and you'll feel it." That night she met Jack and the kids at the small park near West Side. It was unplanned. Lily had insisted on dropping by with the cookies they'd baked. The autumn air was crisp, the kind that turned breath into faint clouds under the streetlights. Ethan spotted his father first, waving him over. Jack came from the bench where he'd been fixing the chain on a swing, his hands faintly greasy. "Busy day?" he asked. "Productive," she said. "You look like someone who just moved a chess piece she's been saving." "Maybe I did." They walked the loop path while the kids played on the jungle gym. She told him about the meeting, the contracts, the way Richard's face had shifted when the board turned its attention. "Sounds like you've rattled him," Jack said. "Rattled isn't enough," she admitted. "People like him recover fast. I need him contained." Jack glanced toward the swings where Lily was trying to teach Ethan how to pump higher. "You're fighting him for the company, but you're also fighting him for them." She didn't answer, but he wasn't wrong. Later, as they sat on the bench watching the kids, Jack said, "I'm not great at boardroom politics, but I know fights. And sometimes the person you're after will go for someone near you instead of you directly. It's easier." She met his eyes. "You think he'll come for you again?" "I think he'll try." She thought of the fabricated login breach, the sudden transfer order, the way Richard used formal processes like blunt instruments. "Then we don't give him an opening." Jack smiled faintly. "You're assuming I'm the one who needs guarding." When they parted ways, the city felt unusually still, as if it was holding its breath. She knew it was only a matter of time before Richard made his next move, and this time she intended to see it coming before it landed. By Friday morning, the rhythm of the office felt off, like a song played just slightly out of tune. Conversations quieted when Victoria stepped into a room, and more than once she caught a glance quickly diverted. Richard was moving under the surface again. She could feel it in the way people's posture shifted in the sudden silences. Nora appeared in her doorway holding 2 cups of coffee, setting one on the desk before speaking. You should know Richard's been asking around about Jack, not the building transfer this time. Personal stuff. Who he spends time with, who he talks to outside work. Victoria's pen stilled. He's fishing. Yeah. And in my experience, when a man like that goes personal, it's because he's out of leverage in the professional lane. He's not out of leverage, Victoria said. He's just moving it somewhere else. Later that afternoon, she drove to Westside to check on a supply delivery. Jack was in the lobby replacing a section of carpet that had frayed near the elevators. He looked up as she approached, brow furrowing. You've got that look again. What look? The one you get when you're about to tell me something I'm not going to like. She hesitated, weighing the cost of honesty. Richard's been asking questions. About you. About your life outside work. Jack leaned back on his heels, resting his hands on his knees. Guess it's easier than trying to beat me at mopping floors. I'm serious. So am I. If he wants to know where I buy my groceries, he's welcome to follow me to the corner store. It's not groceries he's after, she said. It's ammunition. Jack's eyes narrowed, but his voice stayed steady. Then he's going to be disappointed. I've got nothing worth loading into a weapon. She wanted to believe that. But she also knew men like Richard didn't need the truth to land a hit. They just needed a story convincing enough to pass in a crowded hallway. The following evening, she stopped by Jack's apartment to drop off some forms he needed for the facilities budget. The place was small but orderly. The walls lined with Ethan's school projects and a few framed photographs. His son at the beach, a younger Jack in a minor league baseball uniform, a black and white shot of an older man she guessed was his father. Ethan came bounding out from his room holding a half-finished model of the wind turbine. We made it smaller so it can spin faster, he announced. Jack smiled faintly. And so it doesn't rattle the windows. Victoria stayed for a cup of coffee, the conversation easy at first until Jack set his mug down and said, You know, this isn't really about me. How do you mean Richard's not digging into my life because I matter to him? He's doing it because I matter to you. You're the target. I'm just the way to get there. She didn't argue because she knew he was right. On Sunday, the first real strike came. An anonymous email circulated to several board members alleging that Jack had been involved in a questionable incident at a former job. No details, no evidence, just enough to plant a seed. Nora forwarded it to her with a single line. He's starting. Victoria called Jack immediately. Did you leave a job under bad terms? No, he said. Unless you count the supermarket gig I quit in high school because the manager kept shorting my hours. Then we digged, she said. We find out exactly what he's trying to twist. By Monday, she had the pieces. Years ago, Jack had intervened in a parking lot argument between 2 men, one of whom turned out to be a supervisor at the time. Words escalated, the supervisor tripped, and though Jack hadn't touched him, the man filed a complaint. It went nowhere, but the record existed, buried in HR archives at a company that no longer operated. Richard must have thought that was enough to spin into something darker. When she told Jack, he shrugged. Let him spin it. People who know me won't buy it, and the ones who don't, she asked. He didn't answer right away. Then they'll have to decide if they trust a rumor over what's in front of them. That night she lay awake, the city hum filtering in through the windows. Richard's tactic was simple. Wear them down piece by piece until fatigue did what force couldn't. But she wasn't tired. Not yet. And as the week turned, she realized something important. Richard was no longer playing for control of the company alone. Now he was playing to break her resolve, that she thought might be his final mistake. By Wednesday morning, the rain was coming in sideways, tapping against the glass walls of Victoria's office like impatient fingers. She stood with her arms crossed, watching the blur of the city below when Nora stepped in, holding a manila envelope. You're going to want to sit for this, Nora said, setting it on the desk. Victoria stayed standing. What is it, printouts? Richard's been meeting with a private investigator. He's not just digging for dirt on Jack anymore. He's digging for anything on you. Victoria's fingers brushed the edge of the envelope but didn't open it right away. And Nora hesitated. So far, it's nothing that would hold in daylight. Old photos, out-of-context quotes from interviews, speculation about your personal finances. But the intent's clear. He's building a narrative. Finally, Victoria slid the papers free. Grainy shots of her leaving her apartment, of her with Jack and the kids in the park, a candid photo of her hugging Lily outside school. One image in particular made her jaw tighten her, and Jack standing close, talking, their faces shadowed by a street lamp. "He's going to push this as inappropriate," she said. "Of course he is," Nora replied. "He can't get you on contract, so he'll go after Perception." Victoria closed the envelope and set it aside. "Then we make Perception work for us before he gets to it." That afternoon she called Jack into her office. He stepped in, rainwater beading on the shoulders of his jacket. "What's going on?" he asked. "He's shifting focus." "Now it's about me," she said. Jack's brow furrowed. "You mean us?" She nodded. "You're in the photos. Park Diner walking home. All very suggestive if you frame it the right way." Jack's mouth twitched in something that wasn't quite a smile. "And I'm guessing he'll frame it exactly that way." "Yes, which is why I'm telling you now. This is going to get louder before it dies down." He leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms. "Then maybe we don't let him be the one telling the story." She studied him. "You're suggesting we get ahead of it? Why not truth's on our side? If people see it before it's twisted, maybe they stop looking for shadows." It was a risk, but in her mind, risk had always been preferable to retreat. 2 days later at the quarterly community outreach event, an open house-style gathering meant to showcase the company's projects. Victoria made her move. She arrived with Jack, openly, the kids in tow, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. She introduced him to board members as a key part of our facilities team and made sure he was seen talking with department heads and clients. Richard was there, of course, standing near the catering table with a glass of something amber in his hand. His eyes flicked to Jack, then back to her, and she caught the faint curl of his lip. When the speeches began, Victoria took the microphone. "This company doesn't run on architecture alone," she said, her voice carrying through the glass atrium. "It runs on people who show up not just for their jobs, but for each other." Her gaze landed briefly on Jack. "And sometimes those people stand beside you when others would rather see you fall." The applause was genuine warm. Richard clapped too, but slowly his eyes fixed on her like a promise. Later, as the crowd thinned, Jack found her by the service exit. "That was bold," he said. "It was necessary." "Yeah," he said, glancing back toward the room where Richard still lingered, "but now you've made it clear you're not afraid of standing next to me." That's going to make him push harder. She met his gaze. "Then he'll find out I don't break easy." That night, long after the event ended, she sat at her kitchen table with the city's quiet hum outside the window. The photos, the whispers, the orchestrated rumors, they were all just parts of the same game. And if Richard thought she was playing defense, he was about to find out she knew exactly how to turn the board around. The first strike came on a Monday morning, neatly timed to land just as the work week began. A gossip blog that specialized in corporate intrigue posted a blurry photo of Victoria and Jack in the park, paired with a headline that practically dripped with innuendo. The text that followed was all insinuation, an unconfirmed relationship between an executive and a subordinate, whispered concerns about professionalism, speculation about preferential treatment. By 9 a.m., the link had been emailed, texted, and quietly passed around the office. People didn't say much when she walked through the halls, but their eyes told her everything they'd read. Yet they were curious, and some had already decided what it meant. Nora came in without knocking, phone in hand. It's already hit 3 industry forums. Richard's fingerprints are all over it. No one else benefits from this landing now. Victoria leaned back in her chair. "He wants me rattled before the board follow-up next week. Then we don't give him the satisfaction." Jack appeared in her doorway not 10 minutes later, looking more irritated than worried. "I saw it," he said. Ethan saw it too. "I told him it's just garbage. People make up when they've got nothing better to do, but it still lands," she finished. He nodded. "Yeah, it still lands." She stood coming around the desk. "Richard's banking on this becoming a distraction. If we handle it like we've got something to hide, it works for him. If we handle it like the lie it is, he loses momentum." Jack's voice softened. "That's easy for you to say. You're used to the spotlight. I'm just the guy fixing the leaks. You're not just anything," she said, "and the only way through this is together." By midweek, she made her countermove. At an internal leadership luncheon, she spoke about transparency and the danger of rumor in undermining workplace trust. She didn't mention Richard. She didn't mention the blog. But when she talked about the importance of judging people by the work they do, not by the stories others tell her, meaning was impossible to miss. Across the room, Richard sipped his water with deliberate calm, but the twitch at the corner of his mouth betrayed him. That night, she and Jack took the kids to a small Italian place tucked between two brownstones. The noise inside was loud enough to make private conversation possible, the clink of plates and bursts of laughter creating a cocoon of sound. "Do you think this is going to stick?" Jack asked quietly once the kids were distracted with their pasta. "No," she said. "It'll burn hot, then die out. Rumors always do unless you feed them." He studied her face for a long moment. "You're sure about that, I'm sure about us," she replied. "And that's the only part I can control." For a while, the conversation drifted to lighter things: Ethan's science project, Lily's upcoming piano recital, a neighborhood street fair they might visit. But beneath it all, the weight of the week lingered like a shadow in the corners. The next morning, Nora called her from the lobby. "You need to get down here, now!" When Victoria arrived, two men in plain suits were standing by the reception desk, badges clipped to their belts. One introduced himself as an investigator from the city's Ethics Commission. "We've received a formal complaint," he said, alleging misuse of company funds in connection with personal relationships. "We'll need to review certain records." Richard was nowhere in sight, but she didn't need to see him to know he was behind it. She kept her voice level. "You'll have full cooperation. My office will provide whatever you need." The men nodded, already jotting notes. As they left with Nora to begin their review, Jack caught her eye from across the lobby. He didn't say anything, but the set of his jaw was answer enough. He knew exactly what this was, and so did she. Later, as the day wound down and the city outside began to glow in the early evening, Victoria stood by her office window. Jack stepped in, closing the door behind him. "He's not stopping," Jack said. "No," she agreed. "But neither am I." There was no bravado in her voice, no forced confidence, just a steady resolve that matched the storm gathering in her eyes. She knew the game had changed again. The stakes pushed higher, the line between personal and professional deliberately blurred. And she knew Richard believed he had finally found the pressure point that would make her fold. He was wrong.